Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tes Vov Amud Beis. Starting with Daf Tes Vov Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara has been discussing when a person gives tzedakah, one has to do so with sensitivity. Not just sensitivity, but also with the knowledge of how he's going to give the tzedakah to make it so that it's going to be the most discreet way of giving, most comfortable for the receiver. And therefore the pasuk that states, not Ashrei Ish Noisein Dal, the Gemara is Medayik, it doesn't say fortune is one who gives to the poor person, but rather Ashrei Ish Maskil El Dal. Fortune is a person who has seichel to the way he does the tzedakah. Now our Gemara tells us not only is it in a way of how you give the tzedakah, but also to know where you shall give the tzedakah. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chama bar Chanino, Rabbi Hoshaya, Havu metailin beilin kinishta delud. The two of them were traveling, they were walking amongst the Beis HaKnesses of Lud. Omar Rabbi Chama bar Chanino, Rabbi Hoshaya. Kama momon shiku avoisai kan. He looks at the Beis HaKnesses and says, how much money did my forefathers invest? How much they put into this Beis HaKnesses? Omalei. Rav Hoshai said back to Rabbi Chama bar Chanino, Kama nefashos shiku avosecha kan. But how many nefashos did your forefathers invest over here? Lo hava is bnei nash diloin be'araisa, where they're not people who were toiling in Torah, who need to be supported, and that would have been a better way of supporting them than to give them money even to the Beis HaKnesses. The Gemara tells us similar Maisa. Rabbi Avun Ovid Ilin Taraya Desidra Rabba. It says over here that Rabbi Avon, he made the doors, the gates of the great Beis HaKnesses, on top of Tezvav and Beis. Also Rabbi Mona Legabe, Rabbi Mona came to him, Omalei. So he says to Rabbi Mona, Chami Mai Avdis. He was praising himself. Look at what I did. I made such beautiful gates for the Beis HaKnesses. Omalei. Rabbi Mona responded with the following pasuk. Now this pasuk is talking about where Klal Yisrael, the Navi says, is building Botei Knesios that are ultimately for Avodah Zarah, Chalila. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu certainly is unhappy with that. Omalei, vayishkach Yisrael es oiseyu, vayiven heichalois. Klal Yisrael forgets their maker and builds heichalois, different types of temples. Now again, the Navi is talking about for Avodah Zarah, but Rabbi Mona uses this pasuk to say that, to chastise him and say, Lo hava b'nei nash di lo'oim be'araisa, where they're not people who are toiling in the Torah, who require your funds, and therefore that would have been a better place to place your money of tzedakah than even building these beautiful gates for the Beis HaKnesses. Tani, it's taught, Kodshei HaMizbeach Moitzin es Haroi Lohem Mikodshei Bedek HaBayis. The funds that were necessary for the Kodshei Mizbeach, for the communal funds of the Korbanos, if necessary, they were taken ultimately from the Kodshei Bedek HaBayis, for the upkeep of the Bedek HaBayis, but not vice versa. Ein Kodshei Bedek HaBayis Moitzin es Haroi Lohen Mikodshei Mizbeach, but we wouldn't take from the Kodshei Mizbeach for the Bedek HaBayis. Ask the Gemara, but our Mishnah doesn't say anything about the money that goes to Bedek HaBayis will be ultimately given also to the Kodshei HaMizbeach. V'hotaninon Kli shematzu boy tzorich lebedek habayis. It states that those who donate kelim to the bedek habayis, so every 30 days the treasurer will determine if the bedek habayis needs those kelim. If they do, then they'll keep them there. However, if they do not need such kelim, they'll sell them, and the proceeds will then be used for the upkeep, the bedek habayis. So it states in the Mishnah, Kli shematzu boy tzorich lebedek habayis, a kli that was determined to be needed by the Bedek HaBayis, Menichin Oyser, they will leave it. V'hashar nimkorim b'demehem noiflin lebedek HaBayis. And the rest that are not needed, then they would sell them. And again, the proceeds would be used for the upkeep, the Bedek HaBayis of the Beis HaMikdash. So we see over here that money was for the Bedek HaBayis. We don't see that it was then a portion to the Mizbeach, Kachim Mizbeach. Om Reb Chizkiya, Keini Masnisa, Lelishkas Bedek HaBayis. He says that indeed this is the true explanation of the Mishnah. The Mishnah not discussing that if there's a shortage of funds in the communal offerings of the Mizbeach, that some of the monies that were in the Bedek HaBayis will be used for the Kachim Mizbeach. The Mishnah is not discussing that, and therefore it doesn't talk about that. It only says those funds will be used for the Bedek HaBayis, but en hachenami, if necessary, and there's a deficient amount of funds for Kachim Mizbeach, indeed, they will then use some of those funds from Bedek HaBayis towards the Kachim Mizbeach. Hadran Aloch Perek Eluhein Hamamunin. The 6th Perek begins with speaking about also those rooms that we talked about, those lishkois. We had mentioned 2 lishkois in the end of the last Perek, the lishka for the kelim that we had just spoken about, and also the lishka that is given for tzedakah. Now, the Mishnah enumerates that there are other lishkois. Shloisha asar shoifaros. There are 13 shoifaros. These are different kupois, and the Gemara will explain why they're called shoifaros. Shloisha asar shulchonos. Once we mentioned there are 13 rooms for the funds, different types of kupois. We also mentioned there are Shlosha Asar Shulchanos, 13 different tables, which the Mishnah will explain in the Hemshech of the Perek. Shlosha Srei Hishtachavoyus HaBamikdash. There are 13 also bowing downs the Beis HaMikdash. Again, the Mishnahs will speak about in the Hemshech, but referring to the bowing down in Hoidah Tagrish Baruch Hu. Shal Beis Rabban Gamliel Shal Beis Chananya Segan HaKayhanim Hayu Mishtachim Ba'ar Ba'asar. They would bow down 14 different places. The Mishnah goes on to say, V'heichen haisa yisei, where was that 14th additional place that's mentioned that Rav Chananya, Sgan HaKayhanim, and Rav Gamliel would count as Hishtachavoyos? Kineged dir ha'etzim. That was opposite the place that was storing the wood. Shekein mesorez biyodon me'avoisehen, because they have a tradition from their forefathers to Shom ha'aron gnignaz. That's where the aron of the Beis HaMikdash was ultimately nignaz, was hidden. Now the Mishnah recounts the following Maaseh. Maaseh bekohen echod shahaya misasek. There was a story told about a Kohen who was involved in different aspects in the Beis HaMikdash, and Ra es haritzpo shehi meshuna mechavrosel. While he was involved with the wood over there in the Beis HaMikdash, he noticed that there was one place in the flooring that was different. It was not exactly level and in place as all the other pieces of stone. And it caught his eye. Bo va'omar lechaver. He came and he called his friend. Lo hispik ligmor es hadovar. The matter was not completed until he actually passed away. He died before he was able to complete the matter and reveal it to his friend. But it was known certainly that is where the Aron was indeed hidden. The Gemara now explains what is this that we're referring to as shofaros, that there are 13 shofaros. Says the Gemara Tani, it's taught in the following statement. We learn hashofaros halalu akumois hayu. They were curved in the shape of a shofar. Why was the kupa shaped in such a manner? Tzorois melamalon v'rechovis melamato. Just like a shofar, that it was narrow above and then it was widened at the end. Why? Explains the Gemara, because of people who are trying to then deceive and steal. In other words, once you have a narrow opening, it's very difficult to then reach one's hand and take from the kupa that is already then curved and then widened. to get to that widened part and bring it out from the narrow is essentially impossible without being noticed, certainly. So therefore it was shaped in such a form of a shofar, and therefore they were called shofaros. But indeed they were kupos. Tani, the Gemara brings b'shem Rabbi Eliezer, Ha'aron gola imahen leBavel. The Aaron HaKodesh was exiled with Klal Yisrael to Bavel. My taima, what is the reason? He brings the pasuk lo yivoser davar Omar Hashem. I'll bring you the entire verse. The verse states like this: Hinei, behold, Yomim Boim V'nisa Kol Asher B'veisecha. The days are coming, and all that was in your house. V'asher Otzru Avosecha Adem Hazeh, and all of that which your forefathers gathered until this day. Ba'bevola, they will be carried to Bavel. Lo Yivoser Davar Omar Hashem. There will not be anything that left over, says Hashem. So the Gemara says like this: Lo Yivoser Davar Omar Hashem. There will not be anything left over. The Gemara now uses the word Davar. Ein Davar Ela Shehadibrois Lesoichai. Davar is referring to the Dibrois that are Lesoichai, which is referring to the Dibros inside the Aron. V'chein hu oimer. And similarly it says in the Pasuk, V'hishuvas hashana sholach hamelech Nebuchadnezzar. And at the turn of the year, the king Nebuchadnezzar he sent, V'yaviyehu bebevola im klei chemda as beis Hashem. And he brought to Bavel with the klei chemda, the base of Hashem. Ezu klei chemda beis Hashem. What is this referring to, the klei chemda? The cherished vessel of the Beis Hashem, Zeh HaAron. This is referring to the Aaron. So the Aaron was, according to this opinion, exiled with Klal Yisrael into Bavel. There's another opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, B'mekaymo Yahaya HaAron Nignas. The Aaron was hidden in its very place. Hoduhu Dirsiv, and he brings the Pasuk. I'll read you the Pasuk in its entirety. Vayarichu Habadim. And the badim, the poles holding the Aaron, were lengthened, were extended. V'yerau roshe habadim min hakodesh al pnei advir, and the head of these poles appeared. They were seen from the kodesh, that's the heichal, al pnei advir. V'lo yerau hachutza, going through to the kodesh, from kodesh hakodashim. It was not going to be lo yero, it could not be seen. The pasuk goes on to say, it couldn't be seen from the outside. V'yu sham ad hayom hazeh, and it will remain there until this day. So the Gemara brings this pasuk again. Rishim ben Lakish Omer, v'mekaymo haya Aaron nignas. In that very place, the Aaron was hidden. Haduhu dichsiv. That pasuk is stated, vayarichu habadim v'yeru roshe habadim el hakodesh el pnei advir. V'lo yerou hachutza, it would not be seen from the outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And the end, the post that we quoted says, Vayu sham ad hayom hazeh, and they will be there until this day. The Gemara now asks on this pasuk, because on the one hand it says it was seen, and it said it was not seen. Ksi vayerou va'at amis lo yerou. How is that understood? Ella, says the Gemara, nirin v'lo nirin. It appeared and it did not appear. Meaning what? Boltin v'yotzin kishnei dadei ha'isha. It was protruding onto the paroiches. Through the paroiches, it was protruding, just like a woman's whose breasts seem to then be protruded. It's not seen, but one sees the shape, and therefore, so too the badim of the Aaron. One sees the badim, but could not actually see the badim themselves. Says the Gemara, we have additional opinion, a third opinion in regards to the Aaron. V'Rabbanan amrei belishkas dir ha'etzim hoya Aaron nignaz gonus. The Rabbanan, the opinion of our Mishnah, says that the Aaron was hidden in the place opposite where they would store the wood in the Beis HaMikdash. And now the Gemara tells the following Maaseh. Maaseh b'koyin echad balmum shahaya oimed umefatzel eitzim belishkas dir ha'etzim. The kohen who could not do the avodah, so he was involved in the eitzim and peeling the eitzim to make sure that there was no worm-eaten eitzim that could not be used for the mizbeach. And he noticed on the floor something that was mishtane bechavrusel. It was a different type of stone that caught his eye, that was different from the other flooring. Bo v'omar lechavero, he came and he said to his friend, Boy ure'ei es haritzpa hazois, come and see this flooring. Shehi mishtane bechavroseh, which is different from the other flooring. Lo hispik ligmor es hadovar. He did not finish the matter ad sheyatzasa nishmasoi, until he died. V'yadu biyichud shesham ha'aron nigonus. Then they knew with certainty that that is where the Aron was. Indeed, Gonus was hidden. The Gemara says, Tani teaches Rabbi Oshaya, Hikish aleh bekurnis. He was hitting the ground with a kurnis, with a hammer. V'yotzas eish v'saraftoi. When he took that hammer and he put the hammer hitting on that piece of stone that was different, immediately a fire came out and consumed him.